Hello there, friends and family, and anybody that is lucky enough to watch this video of mine. Today is Sunday, January the 16th, 2022. And here we are. You know, it was just Christmas, it was just New Year's, and here we are, almost, nearly halfway through the month of January, and, well on our way to a wonderful new year, I hope. The news, though, so far is not the greatest because we do have to deal with this Omicron variant of COVID-19. And so hospitalizations are going up, and it creates this labor shortage because anytime that anybody is tested and they show that they have COVID, well, then they have to quarantine themselves for 5 days. They can't go to work. And that's beginning to show up just about everywhere. So I'm not going to go through a lot of details, on the news, but I will mention the things, that kind of concern me, my family, and concerns everyone else in the United States. Because, we are going through another phase of the COVID-19 or Wuhan flu pandemic. And the latest variant, of course, is that Omicron, which doesn't seem to be as deadly as the Delta variant or the very first one that came and, wiped out substantial segments of the population that had underlying problems and health problems, and it was really quite a harrowing thing, and it kept us homebound basically for the year of 2020, and 2021 wasn't much better, I have to say. Even though we thought that 2021 would be better, but. We have all kinds of things happening in the world right now. China just went on lockdown. Well, not exactly lockdown. They simply canceled permission to enter the country from the United States into China. That's something that we should have done immediately, when we heard that there's something going on in China, because so much of the world woes in our health activities, do seem to originate in Asia, and specifically in China. So, but no matter where the origination is, it needs to be addressed, and we need to react to it quickly. For instance, the Delta variant, I think, first showed up in Britain, and I think they reacted to it quite quickly. And then now the Omicron showed up in South Africa first. And I think the United States, even President Biden kind of reacted to it by restricting flights between Africa and the United States. And it really didn't do any good because this sucker is really spreading like a son of a gun. So, among some of the tragic things that happen, around the holidays, of course, people die. Bob Dole died in November, and Sidney Poitier died just, early last month. And, actually early this month. He was 94, Bob Dole was 98, so it sounds like they've lived a full life. But from my perspective, I'm 82, so that's not that far away. And fortunately, I'm in really good health right now. But that's something that can change rapidly, so I'm not going to dwell and brag about it, or the wonderful shape I'm in and so forth, So anyway, of course, when you don't have people to do the work, then prices increase because, ships have to be unloaded. They don't get unloaded. And so there are shortages and the supply chain suffers. And for instance, I went to a restaurant. It was, they're doing most of their business right now with, Chick-fil-A. And, family really likes Chick-fil-A, so I went there to get our Chick-fil-A fix. And I noticed that the restaurant portion was cordoned off, and there it, and I asked, are you shutting down for remodeling? They said, no, we just can't get any help in to sterilize and wash down the seating areas and eating areas in compliance with what the state and local authorities demand. So, they just, I guess they laid the people off, or that wanted to come to work because they shut down the entire job because of lack of labor. But it that pings around and has effects all over the place. Recently in the neighborhood, I saw a new electric truck. This is a non sequitur. It's just an interesting thing, and it's called a Rivian. So there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about the Rivian EV truck. They call it the R1T EV truck. Anyway, it looks kind of cool. Looks basically like a truck. Nothing like Tesla's Cybertruck, but evidently it's quite a cool truck. And Rivian has really got an infusion of all kinds of money, so they're setting up production facilities and so forth. But nobody knows what's going to happen with a company like this. We've seen Karma go under, and Faraday is not doing all that well. I don't know, there's a company called Nikola that they're not doing the greatest either. So Tesla seemed to have survived this shortage of chips from Taiwan and so forth. Okay, so here we are in the middle of January of 2022. And really what I wanted to talk about is something that my son was interested in, because he said, so Dad, what was it like to work in a machine shop? And so I just wanted to talk about this a little bit, because I don't know how many people that were listening to this video, or how many people in my family have ever seen a machine shop, let alone worked in it, because it's kind of a unique facility. And in our area here right now, the machine shop workers, are actually apprentices and people that they're largely immigrants, and they learned a trade in another country, because our trade schools have been largely shut down. Nobody's interested in it. I know Southern California Edison had trained people, but for the crafts and the skills that they required. And I think they're still doing that. So it's still going on. I think there are probably trades and crafts being learned in the refineries and some of the manufacturing. And when you're talking about big industry like utility, and you're talking about refineries, they all have to have a machine shop. And then there are independent machine shops around the area all over the place. Well, anyway, so I started my machine shop career. I was a machinist apprentice, and machinist is not exactly the right word for it, because I started in Germany at Hermann Fauder Weltfreies Maschinenfabrik, and we did have a machine shop just for the apprentices. And so that was my first exposure to machining. In fact, I still have a picture which I'm going to try to attach to this particular video, of me and operating a lathe and, looking kind of cool, how young men looked in the 1950s. Anyway, So that was my first exposure to machine shops. And then when we immigrated to the United States, somehow once again I drifted into machine shops. And when I took my first job right after college, after graduating as a mechanical engineer, I went to work for U.S. Steel Corporation in Chicago. And guess what? Ultimately, I became a machine shop foreman and had a career, in supervising people, that did the work, So I no longer did the work myself, but I really had to know what's going on. But I was pretty young, I was 22 years old, and they made me a supervisor in a machine shop at U.S. Steel Chicago South Works. And there was a lot of hard feelings, with the people that worked there, because it was not customary for somebody as young as me to actually know something about machining and know about their craft. So a machine shop is kind of is a little bit different than some of the shops that produce welders and some of the other trades because for instance, a welder really does have to buy a lot of equipment, and I was actually involved with a program by the Edison Company called Tools for Success, and we gave out tools and toolboxes, for new apprentices that became welders, and some of the trades that the trade schools in downtown LA provided. So in a machine shop, we as a machinist, I really had, everybody had a toolbox, but we had a minimum investment in tooling. For instance, a set of vernier calipers is what I had with me all the time. Everything, all the other tools were pretty expensive, like micrometers and so forth. And so the a machine shop has what they call a tool crib, because you got to be wondering, how machinists do their work when there's so much special equipment is required, special drills, taps, all kinds of measuring devices, height gauges, Joe blocks, all these things. And so these are all obtained in what we call the tool crib. In other words, all of the expensive tools that the machinist not normally can purchase for themselves, so they're available. And they are in the tool crib. So everybody that works in a machine shop then gets, for instance, at Herman Fowler, I used to have 10 tool chits. And these chits had a number on it. For instance, my number, I still remember, was 169. I don't know why it was 169, but that's what it was. And it was stamped on there. And of course, the tool crib, you had a list of, all of the tool chit numbers. So what you did is, if you needed a special tool, either a tap or, a height gauge or a micrometer, or calibers, that were, if you had to measure something that's like 30 inches across, you needed special calibers that you didn't really, it's not something that was part of your toolbox, or a punch, or, things of that nature. And so what you would do is you would hand the tool crib attendant a tool chit, with your number, and then they'd give you the instrument that you needed, whether it's a micrometer or a set of Joe blocks or something. Anyway, So that's pretty much how that worked. And then, you brought it back and they give you your chit back. So, my God, you didn't have, if you ever lost any of those things, that was like a criminal investigation because, if they showed up and you got a new set and and somebody a tool crib attendant would get one of these. Maybe he didn't check the list, and then somebody could walk away with an expensive piece of equipment. So when I became a supervisor at U.S. Steel in the machine shop, that was after I was the engineer of operating practices, which exposed me to all of the entire maintenance department activities. They finally decided, well, yeah, the guy is a machinist, why don't we give him a job in a machine shop, and make him a supervisor there. After all, he was a college grad, so, they probably didn't trust me to work as a machinist, so they made me a supervisor. Anyway, and, that worked out pretty well. Because I had to earn the trust, of all these guys. I remember some of the guys were saying to me, "Hey, why are you telling me what to do? Because I have a son that's older than you." Oh crap! It was, but it wasn't long, and they understood that I actually did know what the heck I was talking about, and they test you, and pretty soon they trusted me, because. One of the things that a supervisor had to do is, I had a stack of work orders. I knew how many work hours I had for the week because we had a weekly budget, and so if for some reason or another I ran out of hours, I had to lay people off. But anyway, as a freshman supervisor, you started out in the lathe section. And the lathe section, of course, had all of the, lathe turning machines and also the screw machines. And the hierarchy in a machine shop is understood. For instance, on the very bottom, the least paid people are the ones that, of course, clean up. But it's really important because in a machine shop, you produce a copious amount of chips, and they have to be segregated. For instance, brass chips have to be handled different than steel chips and so forth. So it takes a lot of diligence to do this. In a machine shop like U.S. Steel that worked around the clock, 24 hours basically, there were several hundred people, doing that work. Anyway, and so here you have the people that sweep the floors, and empty the chip pans and so forth. They're the bottom rung. Now, just because they're the bottom rung and maybe the least paid or least skilled required, doesn't mean that they weren't important. They were really damn important because work would stop if the chip pan was full. If the guy took off and you didn't replace one and you couldn't get somebody to come in, that was a disaster. Because, the machinist, he didn't want to remove the chip pan and clean out all that stuff. And sometimes you had to do it, and I had to force him to do it because there was nobody else to do it. But the problem was that you lost this production, that they could do. So, and then, the next rung of level of knowledge and skill were the drill press operators. So the people that had drill press, operated drill presses, they would just operate the drill presses, and that was it, and you would hand them their work and a work order. And now the thing about a supervisor in the machine shop is you had to provide the material. So if you had a job, somebody had to do something, a shaft or whatever, you had to go out in the yard and make sure that you had the material, and then you get laborers, forklift operators, cranes, and so forth to bring that material in and set it up, to the guy in the lathe, could then pick it up with jib cranes or the overhead crane, electric overhead travel. These activities in a machine shop are just immense. And 10, 15 minutes of talking about machine shops, doesn't do it injustice. But a lot of stuff goes out there. So after the drill press operators, which are the least skilled, or the next skill level, then the screw machine operators are next. And those are the kind of automatic machines, that are tooled to drill holes, do threaded parts that that are required, and maybe crane wheels or something like that. Some simple turning. And the screw machine operators, so they also call them turret lathes because they have drills and taps and things in a turret that are then used to make a hole in something, that turns. But anyway, those are not the skills required to that are they're important again, but not very didn't need a lot of education for that. In fact, some of these guys, they couldn't even speak English, because they were immigrants from Eastern Europe or Mexico or something, but they didn't need to speak much because they didn't require a lot of attention. So, and then the next level were the shapers, and some of them, simple milling machines and so forth. Actually, a Bridgeport milling machine was really important, but also along that line, were grinders, flat grinders, and again, simple machines that didn't require they required skill, but not the kind of skill that was ultimately required in people that ran the big milling machines. Large milling machines, and they can attack, let's say, a casting for a machine bed of some sort that may weigh a couple of tons. And then they have to figure out, what machining is required on it. And so they really are skilled in reading blueprints. And I was actually pretty good at this, so they, as I rose in rank, so to speak, up to the, to be able to supervise the milling machine guys, by that time they were able to trust me because I could, look at a set of prints, and then, we would use some measuring devices and lay out equipment and rulers and scales that were built into the machine to set up the big casting. And you had to make sure that you started it in the right place, because if you didn't, by the time you have done 2 or 3 surfaces, you may be actually out of material on that casting because you started in the wrong place. And that's a disaster, because now you throw it away, especially if it's cast iron, it has to be destroyed. And yeah, he could get fired for things like that, so the setup in a milling machine, a large milling machine, a horizontal boring mill, was really critical. So those were the guys that were more highly paid. And then, the supervisors who supervised, people with that skill level, they had to know their stuff. Now, and then of course there were the assembly floor, where all the stuff that was machined had to be put together, and the skill level for that was not necessarily above anyone else's, but it was specialized. So the assembly floor, then everything had to fit, and if they needed additional parts or something wasn't machined right, then they had to go back and be able to tell the foreman in the particular section of what's next to do. So, and at the top skill altogether was actually the people that ran the layout table, which often was a huge slab of maybe marble or a cast iron table that was machined precisely, and the people would read the prints and then for instance, indicate where the material might have to be removed, and where to drill the holes, where to tap threads, and that sort of thing. And then write it all up so that some machinists, can actually follow that and do it right. And they would use like Prussian blue and scribe lines on it and so forth. But the skill of these people was to totally understand what is required, what do you want to end up with. And then these were also the same people that then inspected the completed work and then signed off, whether it was correct or not before it went into the assembly floor. So that's basically the material flow and the skill levels required in a machine shop. And it works well. It works well. So my job, at US Steel, for instance, was opening up the machine shop on sometimes on graveyard shift when it was my turn for graveyard. So I had to show up at midnight, Sunday night, Monday morning, midnight. And, I had a set of keys, and I'd open up the shop and start the shift with about, maybe 30 to 50 people, that are all over the place. And things, cranked up, because oftentimes Saturday and Sunday were minimal crews because, again, like I said, we all had a budget and we probably laid the people off. Sometimes I had to call them back and then pay them overtime because, somebody out in the rolling mills, needed a job to be done, and it had to be done now. And I would wrestle with them over the, how many hours they give me in order to do the job. And if they were powerful enough, they would just tell me, better do it. We'll cover you, So anyway, so every foreman was responsible for a budget. It was the machine shop was highly organized, and we actually started at US Steel, started to get into time studies, so we'd have a crew of industrial engineers that would come around and look at the job, also had to understand it. Now, of course, that was, again, another skill level, the industrial engineers, and they had their own office, but we just kind of got started in this, of time studies, where they'd actually pay an incentive, if you beat their estimate, then you get, incentive payment. You can actually make extra money. And that was pretty clever, actually, but it took a lot of people to make that happen. So we just started to get into this, and I'm sure by the time I left US Steel, which was in 1969, I came to California. Went to Kaiser Steel, of course, there it was again, I was in the machine shop, the forge and weld shop, that kind of thing. So anyway, if you've ever wondered what's going on in a machine shop, hopefully I've given you some sort of a feeling for, what happens there. And so with that, I will now sign off, and I trust that you'll have I wish you a wonderful 2022. And, but I want to make sure that I say that we must infect the universe with us. So long.